Coffee isn't just a drink, it's a journey. Hello, everyone, and welcome. And today we're going to narrate some coffee samples. Alright, let's go. So, if you are a beginner in coffee, if you don't know what taste these coffees are like, I'm the right person, and today we're going to rate them all, and I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about them. And I'm going to show you them in 3, 2, 1. There's 20 of them, and there's something you guys need to know. If you're a beginner, there's some single origins, like this one, that only have one country on them. But there's some countries or samples that have two countries on them, and we call this blended or mixed coffee beans or coffee. Anyway, so let's go rate them all one by one, and I hope you have a great day in advance. Alright, so first up, we got Yemen. Yemen is the most popular country when it comes to coffee. It probably is second or third, but some people think it's first or even the founder of coffee. Yemen has a really rusty and bitter taste when it comes to their coffee. Their coffee is grown in altitudes up to 1,930 to 2,000, and that's a good sign because when a coffee is grown in a higher altitude, that means the coffee swells more, and that brings the flavor much more into the beans. Anyway, you've probably gone to a restaurant and ordered a mocha, and you've probably wondered why it's called mocha. Well, in Yemen, there's a city called Al Mocha, and that's why the coffee is called mocha. So, pretty cool. Next up, we got Colombia. Colombia has one of the most tropical and winey or fruity flavors you can imagine, and some people say why, and that's because Colombia is located in South America. And in South America, there are jungles such as the Amazon and other famous jungles, and that's why they have a fruity or tropical or winey flavor. Colombia's coffee beans are grown in altitudes up to 2,000 meters to 2,100, and that makes the coffee swell more, and that's pretty good. Colombia's coffee is based on wine and fruit, but sometimes it can be bitter like Yemen's, but sometimes it could be even balanced, like it could be bitter and rusty and have fruity and winey flavors at the same time. So it has a really rare chance to you finding that you have a balanced Colombian coffee. But we are going to go to the next one. This next one is also Colombia, and we're gonna skip this one because we already talked about Colombia. The ones that I skipped are the ones that are repetitious. Anyway, next up we got our first mix of this video, which is India and Indonesia. India has one of the most balanced coffees, and most people believe Baba Budan brought coffee to India when he snuck 7 coffee beans to from Yemen to India, and that was in the 17th century. But that myth has not been busted yet because legend says it's in the 17th century. So it's just the myth, or maybe it's actually real. Anyway, India's coffees are very balanced. Sometimes they're a little more bitter, and sometimes they're a little bit more fruity or wine or lighter. That's because India's coffee beans are not grown on top of mountains, they're grown on ground. And some people you might think, oh, but you said if it grows on higher altitudes, it's better. Well, yes, it is. But somehow, India's coffee beans, they swell even when they're on the ground. So it's pretty cool, and it kind of surprised me when I first realized it. And India's coffee beans are grown to 0 meters of altitude. Next up, but we got Indonesia. Indonesia has one of the most bold and earthy flavors of any coffee. And Indonesia has a little bit of wood spice to it too. There's a 2.6 percentage that you can get a winey flavor instead of a bold and earthy flavor. And for most people, winey is very better because it's less bitter than earthy and rustiness. So there's a small percentage that you can get winey coffee beans if you're in Indonesia. Indonesia's coffee beans are grown in altitudes up to 1,900 to 2,000, and that's a pretty good sign that their coffee beans are being grown in good altitudes. And next up on this list, we got Colombia and Uganda. We talked about Colombia, so we're gonna go straight to Uganda. Uganda has one of the most balanced coffees as well. It's the same as India's, but it has a little bit of spice to it. Just a little bit. And sometimes you can get a rusty or bitter flavor instead of a balanced flavor. So that's a pretty cool thing. Every coffee bean has its own taste, but sometimes when they swell, they actually change their taste and become from like bitter to tropical. And that's why sometimes it happens like you expect rusty, but it becomes winey for some reason. Well, that's the reason. Uganda's coffee beans are grown in altitudes up to 2,000 to 2,500 meters. It's a pretty good sign. And next up on this list, we got Kenya and Colombia. For some reason, Colombia's just multiplied by 1,000 in this list, but we gotta skip it, and we're going straight to Kenya again. Okay. Kenya has one of the most fruity flavors you can imagine. It's just so fruity and winey that 80% of people want to buy it, but it's pretty rare because Kenya likes to have its coffee for its own people and itself. So it's pretty bad, but it gives it coffee to some people like Ethiopia or South Africa. Ethiopia produces its own coffee, but South Africa doesn't. So it's pretty good for South Africa to have fruity and tropical flavors on its country, sorry. And Kenya's coffee beans are grown in altitudes up to 1,100 to 1,532. It's not the highest altitude, but it's still good. And next up on this list, we got Ethiopia and Indonesia. We talked about Indonesia, we're gonna skip it and go straight to Ethiopia. Ethiopia has one of the most tropical but winey and bitter taste at the same time. It's impossible for you to find something else in their coffee. It's just this one thing. It's winey, it's bitter, and it's tropical. So it's made for any person. I would suggest you buy Ethiopia's coffee. It's #1 in the world right now. It's very, very cheap, and it's really tasty. So I think you should buy this. And Ethiopia's coffees are growing in altitudes up to 1,100 to 2,540. It's the most highest you'll ever find. That's why it's pretty good. Next up on this list, we got Brazil and Indonesia. Brazil is number one in the production of coffee. And some of you people might think because it has the most production of coffee, it should be better. Instead, Brazil should be number one instead of Ethiopia. Well, no, because Brazil's coffee beans don't swell as much as Ethiopia's. So that's why Brazil is not the best coffee seller, but it has the most production, and Brazil's coffee beans taste winey. They're super winey with a little kick of wood spice to it. And it's growing altitudes up to 1,100 to 1,500, and that's the reason they don't swell much as Ethiopia's, because Ethiopia has altitudes up to 1,100 to 1,530. I think I said that, or if I'm wrong, tell me in the comments. But it's more than Brazil's. I meant 2,000, sorry. But it's more than Brazil's. So let's go to the next one and let's see what we have. Alright, so next up we got Vietnam and Indonesia. Vietnam is the same as Indonesia's. It's boldy and earthy, except all that it has a little bit of wood spice to it. And you might ask why? Because they're both in the same continent, in the same place. They're both in Southeast Asia, and that's why they're both coffee beans taste like the same. And Vietnam's coffee beans are grown in altitudes up to 900 to 1,902. So it's either in a very low number or a very high number. And next up on this list, we got Brazil and Cameroon. We talked about Brazil. We're gonna skip it and go to Cameroon. Cameroon has a winey flavor to it, but sometimes it just doesn't have any flavor. Like, if you ask me, would you like Cameroon's coffee or like any other coffee in the world? Cameroon is not the best opinion because the coffee beans don't swell much, and unfortunately, the people are too poor to produce coffee farms in there and to produce coffee. But if they do produce coffee, they don't even have an altitude. It's 0 meters. They do the same as India's, but they don't swell as much. It doesn't have the magic as India's. So unfortunately, it's not the best coffee, and it's probably for some people that have worked with coffee with years, they're gonna say it's the worst coffee. But no, it's not the worst coffee. It's better than few countries, but it's still not the best. Unfortunately, I'm sorry for all the Cameroonians watching this. Sorry. And next up, we got Costa Rica and Uganda. Costa Rica has one of the most tropical and fruity flavors you could imagine, and you might ask why? Because Costa Rica is located in Central America, closer to South America. It's the same story as Colombia's. It's growing altitudes up to 1,100 to 1,992. If I'm correct by my researches. Oh yes, I'm correct. Okay. And next up on this list we got Uganda, but we talked about Uganda. We're gonna skip it. We